ครับสวัสดีครับท่านผู้ชมท่านผู้ฟังทุกท่านนะครับนี่ก็ถือว่าเป็นการพูดคุยแบบพิเศษในโอกาสพิเศษกันเลยนะครับซึ่งขณะนี้เนี่ยผมจะได้มีโอกาสพูดคุยกับผู้ก่อตั้งแล้วก็ประธานของกราดาน่าเวนเจอร์นะครับเวลาเราพูดถึงเรื่องของธุรกิจเวนเจอร์แคปิตอลเนี่ยก็คือเป็นธุรกิจร่วมลงทุนจริงๆก็คือประเภทหนึ่งของสถาบันการเงินในการที่มีเม็ดเงินต่างๆนะครับเพื่อที่จะไปลงทุนในแต่ละประเภทของบริษัทเช่นอาจจะไปลงทุนในบริษัทที่จดทะเบียนในตลาดหลักทรัพย์อย่างนี้เป็นต้นหรือว่าอาจจะไปลงทุนในบริษัทที่ยังไม่ได้เข้าสู่ตลาดหลักทรัพย์แห่งไหนก็ได้นะครับรวมไปถึงประเภทของแต่ละธุรกิจที่ Venture Capital แต่ละแห่งนั้นเขาก็จะมีเป้าหมายนะครับในการจะไปลงทุนอย่างเช่นธุรกิจที่ขณะนี้กำลังพูดถึงกันเยอะเช่น Startup Company หรืออาจจะเป็นเรื่องของธุรกิจใหม่ๆในโลกสมัยใหม่ที่เกี่ยวข้องกับดิจิทัลเช่น Cryptocurrency อย่างนี้เป็นต้นนะครับผมก็เลยคิดว่าวันนี้เป็นโอกาสที่ดีที่จะได้พูดคุยกับผู้บริหารท่านนี้ท่านอยู่ที่ประเทศสเปนนะครับแล้วก็เป็นการพูดคุยที่เราได้สนทนากันมีหลายประเด็นที่เกิดขึ้นเลยโดยเฉพาะในช่วงที่ผ่านมาเนี่ยนะครับเกี่ยวกับเรื่องของบทบาท Venture Capital นะครับและจะเป็นโอกาสยังไงให้กับนักลงทุนไทยที่จะไปลงทุนในต่างประเทศท่ามกลางสภาวะของเศรษฐกิจในปีนี้นี่ผ่านมาได้รวมๆเกือบจะ3 เดือนกันแล้วก็ยังถ้าเป็นภาษาไทยนะเราก็จะเรียกกันว่ายังการฟื้นเศรษฐกิจก็ยังไม่ชัดเจนยังไม่ราบรื่นนี่ล่าสุดก็มีกรณีที่เกิดแบงก์รันนะครับก็คือกรณีที่ธนาคารแห่งหนึ่งที่สหรัฐอเมริกาเรียกกันว่าเป็นธนาคารซิลิคอนวัลเลย์แบงก์นะครับคือเป็นธนาคารที่ปล่อยเฉพาะกับกลุ่มธุรกิจที่ทำสตาร์ทอัพเนี่ยก็มีการยุติธุรกิจไปโดยปริยายโดยทางการของสหรัฐอเมริกาอันนี้ก็ถือว่าเป็นเรื่องนึงที่น่าสนใจและอยู่ในประเด็นปัจจุบันด้วยนะครับเพราะฉะนั้นวันนี้ผมจะได้พูดคุยกับเรื่องนี้ของเขาและผมเชื่อว่าหลายท่านที่ติดตามนะครับB-Times พิเศษในวันนี้เนี่ยจะได้เห็นโอกาสในการลงทุนข้ามชาติหรือว่าข้ามประเทศไปในยุคที่ตอนนี้เศรษฐกิจมีความผันผวนมีความเปราะบางแต่ก็มีโอกาสรวมถึงความเสี่ยงที่จะบริหารจัดการกันด้วย Can you introduce about your company Galdana Venture Company What is your company right
Thank you very much for your invitation. So my name is Marcel Rafart. I'm the managing director of Galdana Ventures. Galdana Ventures is the venture capital division within a bigger entity called Altamar CIM. Altamar CIM is a private asset class investor managing approximately $18 billion. We at Galdana Ventures, what we do is we invest into a good selection of the best venture capital firms worldwide. Those that ultimately are going to be investing into the very best technology companies worldwide. We invest at a very global scale. That means investing into those firms located in the US, in London, Europe, Israel, but also India, Southeast Asia, China, Korea, and Latin America. So we are investors at a global scale, investing into the very top VC firms who at the same time invest into the very top technology companies.
Your company is very large and also with your, I mean, in terms of the large, extensive network investment globally, right?
Correct. We are global investors. We believe that the best for our investors is to be globally exposed. So to have a portfolio that is properly diversified to continents and countries so that you can feel as comfortable as possible. If any crisis or any event takes place in a particular country or continent, then you're compensating that with your presence in other regions of the world.
So in terms of about what is your vision and policy companies about your company policy and strategy to help investors find about the best return on investment with your company?
So we, since we are investing into the very top VC firms, remember that venture capital is a very interesting industry. It's owned by those investors into technology companies in the private phase. That means that those companies that will be successful enough will later on go public, but venture capital firms are investing into the previous phases. So in that phase where companies are still private, that's why we are proposing to our investors a very particular product. It's a long-term product because these investors, these venture capital funds, and as a consequence, ourselves and our investors, we tend to stay private for quite some time until these companies have had time enough to flourish and show its true potential as new, very successful technology companies. So it is a long-term product that invest into the best technology companies that will change our lives and our companies' lives, as it has happened in the last 10, 15 years. Everybody uses nowadays a smartphone, but smartphones are not that old. So someone invented the smartphones 10, 15 years ago. Now they've become very popular. That's what we are doing. We are investing into those new technologies that are not that well known today, but will become very popular and very successful in the coming years. To put you an example, everybody's talking about ChatGPT these days.
Right.
So ChatGPT is a company that obviously needs to demonstrate, and to demonstrate that it typically attracts investments from venture capital funds. If the company is successful enough, and I think that we can all agree that these ones look like a very likely successful story, then that company will continue growing and growing and growing, and at one point in time will go up, will go to any of the stock markets in the world to continue attracting capital, but in the public phase. So we invest into venture capital funds that provide us with access into these technology companies in the private phases.
So according to your explanation, I thought that your company specialized in the long-term investment, right?
Yeah.
Why your company emphasizes on about a long-term investment in relation to, medium-term or the short-term investment?
That's a very good question. And it mostly has to do with the time that these new technologies need in order to demonstrate that they can be very successful. So when a new innovation, when a new technology is invented, typically those inventions, those innovations, and those little companies need some time to progressively demonstrate that they deserve a certain kind of success. So typically, new companies need no less than 7 years, most of the time 7 to 10 years, to try to demonstrate that they can transform our lives and the lives of our companies, because they can bring something relevant to all of us. Let me put you a couple of examples. As I said, ChatGPT, artificial intelligence solutions need some time to demonstrate. Autonomous cars need some time to demonstrate. Cybersecurity solutions need some time to demonstrate. And that time to demonstrate is better in the private phase. And as a consequence, those inventions need approximately 7 to 10 years to try to demonstrate that they are successful enough. That's why we recommend to our investors to devote a portion of their portfolio into technology in the private phase, because it's something interesting enough to complete a well-diversified type of investment strategy.
That is a good reason why that you emphasize on about the long-term investment strategy with your company, right? And I do curious about that. Of course, for this private company, it may take time to develop their product and services, which is in align with your company vision and policy. But how we can make sure, or how we can feel, confidence in about the product and services of the private company can move going on in line with our investment policy, and of course, in return to the investor.
That's a very good point, because not all the little private technology companies will succeed. Some of them will succeed, some others will fail. So our strategy, and that is what we recommend to our investors, is to be well diversified in the number of technology companies that ultimately you are investing into. Because if you invest into a single private technology company, risk is way too high, because the company can succeed or not. And that's too much for an individual investor or for a family office, for instance, to invest into. But if you invest into something like what we do, which is a fund of funds, which ultimately we are exposed to thousands of technology companies, your risk is properly diversified. Again, some of them will succeed, and those that will succeed will pay back very high multiples to those that invested into the private phase. and some others will fail. And it is the combination of some of them succeeding, some of them failing, that at the end will provide us and our investors with a fantastic return.
I got it. So it's very interesting for you to have about the portfolio investment diversification for all kind of for the private company who specializes about the long-term product service, right?
Correct.
Can you give us for more example, like any name of the company that right now you have invested and you can give about more picture in terms of about portfolio investment diversify like this case?
Yeah, so we are investors, ultimately we are investors into thousands of technology companies. But to name a few, we are investors into companies like ChatGPT, as I said. Mm-hmm. We are very proud investors into ChatGPT. We are also very proud investors into ByteDance, the owner of TikTok. We are also very proud investors into SpaceX, the skyrocket company based in the US. So essentially, we are exposed to most of the very successful technology companies worldwide, those that, as I said, are changing our lives. Right. Because we are, both at an individual, but also at a corporate level, we are incorporating those companies into our normal life, So yes, we are very proud investors into these type of companies.
So can I say that your company consider it as about sovereign wealth fund, one type of sovereign wealth fund, or SWF invest in the private asset and VC, right?
Correct. Sovereign funds started to make investments into the private asset classes long time ago. And something we have realized is that there's a secular trend of regular increase of the exposure of the sovereign funds into the private equity space, being venture capital within the private equity space. So yes, sovereign funds are a very convinced type of investor into the private equity and venture capital asset classes.
And according to your idea about the SWF invest in different portfolio, that right now, even with the new future, how the SWF portfolio investment style will be suitable to the future return. Right now, because we have so many kind of private companies in different continents, right? How can you select that? And what is the criteria that you choose that?
I think that sovereign funds feel very comfortable investing in private equity and venture capital, mainly because of the long-term DNA as investors that these type of sovereign funds have. So essentially, what we allow them is to invest in the long term in technology, and they love to invest for the long term because they are very patient type of investors. What they are looking when they are investing in private in private equity and venture capital, they are looking for higher returns to the ones they can obtain in the public markets. And as a consequence, what we recommend to all of them is to have a well-diversified type of investment strategy when it comes to private equity and venture capital. If you do so, then you can obtain the kind of well-diversified, but at the same time higher than public market type of returns.
I try my audience to get in touch with the real situation. So can I say about this? Starting from the financial crisis 2008, and right now we are in about 2023. Along with this 15 years, global faced so many crises in economy, right? From the financial crisis in United States all the way through right now, we faced with the COVID-19 for almost 2 years. And right now we have faced about the super inflation, right? So we have the rising interest rates from the Federal Reserve, this is one of the highest in 15 years. And right now we are in the year of talking about recession. So how does investment in private asset, to promote long-term investment, take for example, like it happened before?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think that we are living in a very particular period where the only predictable thing is that the next 10 years will be highly unpredictable. That's the only predictable thing that we can all agree on. Because as you have said, there's been so many different things that have happened in the last 10, 15 years. And there are no reasons not to continue seeing some big surprises in the next 5 to 10 years as well. So our suggestion is the following. Try to build up portfolios that are well balanced and compensated and diversified. We suggest include private investments into those portfolios because we believe that there's a good way to compensate what you're doing in the rest of the portfolio. But in addition to this, and even more important than these, try to do things, particularly on the private assets. Try to do things with the best partners you can find. There's a very popular sentence these days in financial markets, which is flight to quality. When markets become turbulent, it's when you think about trying to get as close as possible to the best players in any asset class. So our suggestion, again, in private equity and venture capital, is try to find the proper weight within your portfolio. And once you have agreed on this, try to find the best partners you can find in order to feel comfortable and secure for the next 7 to 10 years.
Oh, very interesting, because the next 10 years is very hard to predict what we're going to happen like in the 10 years before, right?
Correct.
So that's why some investor, they might like high risk, high return. Some investor may be cautiously, or some investor may be the traditional or conservative style. So my question is that which type of investor will be suitable for the private asset investment like your company?
Based on our experience, we have mainly two types of investors. One is the institutional type of investors, and that big group would include sovereign funds, pension funds, insurance companies. So big institutions that are managing big portfolios, and one includes some investments in private equity and venture capital. The second type of investors that are very much attracted by these type of products are family offices and wealthy individuals that are progressively building portfolios that tend to be relatively similar to those built up by institutional investors. So family offices and wealthy individuals have also understood that a proper and well-diversified portfolio should also include some portion into private equity and venture capital. And as a consequence, our experience tell us that this segment is also very interested in these type of products.
I see, right. So that's why it's kind of like become a good alternative and chances for investor who kind of like to balance their risk and return in the long-term investment. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
My next question is that because you said that you're going to select about the private equity company, for the technology company, right? But right now we talk about the business or the company, which is perform their business in the BCG model, for the bio-circular company, right? The green company like that, which is really long-term, the long-term investment. Does this group belong to your portfolio strategy?
We are mostly investing into technology companies, companies within the software, cybersecurity, industrial robotics. Those are the sectors where we are heavily investing these days through the venture capitals where we have committed. As I said at the beginning, we believe that the innovation wave keeps growing and growing. And the level of innovation that will transform our lives in the next 10, 15 years will be even bigger than the one that have transformed our lives in the past 15 years. So technology is becoming more and more impactful into our lives. And the amount of innovation that will succeed in the coming years, we expect to be even bigger to the one we've seen in the last 15 years.
So sounds very interesting. And this has become very good strategy in the long-term investment. Maybe can change about the new for the new dilemma for the investor to look for the good in return, right? So
correct.
Can you tell us that on average, with your portfolio objective in return for the investor, how many returns, on average, when invest with your company, that investor can get on that?
Um, we are not allowed to disclose the returns that we are obtaining for our investors, but what I can share is that those VC funds that we are committing, since they started the activity back in the 80s, 90s of the previous century, some of them, some others had started at the beginning of this century, they have traditionally been able to multiply the capital invested by more than 2.5x. So if you can do things if you can commit into the very top venture capital funds, you can reasonably aspire to obtain a very good result that compensates for the illiquidity that you are accepting for some years.
Wow, that's very kind of like more and more get inside about and try to get my audience understand about this way of investment become very, in terms of the long-term safeguard for their return, right? So with current issue, which is a very hot issue right now with SVB Bank and a Signature Bank run in the United States. So some investor might get confused or they don't have a clear picture with this situation compared with the VC, venture capital. Can you distinguish with this? And also can you try to give more explanation? What is the difference of this and how this situation can prove that your strategy is correct and right for the long term?
It's very different. The ones investing into the private technology companies are the venture capital funds. Okay, so and those funds are located in multiple countries and continents all over the world. Then those funds and those companies tend to work with multiple banks, as you do, and as I do, and as your company and my company do. So every company, every individual work typically with more than one bank. No one has to suffer about the use of the cash they have in any of the accounts in Silicon Valley Bank. That was approved yesterday by the local authorities in the US.
Wow. Okay. So at the end, I think that the situation might not get worse, like somebody might think, right?
Correct. It looks like this. I think the local authorities understood that they needed to act rapidly in order to avoid any expansion of the potential crisis. And they did it in a very convincing manner.
Can you give us a recommendation for Thai investor if they want to decide to invest in the long-term investment like with your company, aligned with your strategy, right?
A couple of suggestions following your question. A couple of suggestions is one, be prudent on the weight that how much you want to allocate in your portfolio to long-term investments. Be prudent on that. You can start with a small percentage and then progressively grow it if you feel comfortable. And then the second suggestion is whatever you plan to do in your portfolio in private equity and venture capital, do it with the best partners you can obtain. Do it with the best partners that you can do things with, because you're going to be with that partner for quite some time. So it's better to select the best you can select in any of the different asset classes. Again, because you're going to be living with that investment for quite some time. So you'd better be prudent and at the same time selecting the best partners that you can find in any of these asset classes.
And one of the best partners is Galdana Venture Company, right?
I believe so. This is why I'm working here.
So, thank you very much for your contribution and your time that you spare with us. I think that I got lots of new idea for kind of like invest in the long-term investment with the private equity company before, of course, in one day, this company will be kind of like to go list in the stock market in somewhere else, right? But as you say that during the last couple of years, that institution investor, even with the wealthy people, for the billionaire, they try to invest in the private equity rather than to go into the risky asset like in the stock market. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree.
Excellent. So today, myself, on the behalf of the audience, that would like to thank you very much for your time and your contribution, which is give really insightful, in short, and very precise idea to invest for the like global economy become very fragile, become kind of like risky into the recession or not. We don't know exactly. but the long-term investment with a good return in the private equity, which still has a bright future. This is the right decision and right alternative investment, right?
Agree. Totally, 100%.
เป็นเรื่องราวที่น่าสนใจกับการพูดคุยคุณมาเซล ราฟัตนะครับเป็นผู้บริหารก็คือ founder and chairman ของ Galdana Venture Company ซึ่งพูดถึงประเด็นที่น่าสนใจนะครับแล้วผมคิดว่ามันเป็นแนวคิดหนึ่งสำหรับคนที่อยากจะหาผลตอบแทนจากการลงทุนด้วยภาวะเศรษฐกิจที่มีความเปราะบางมีสถานการณ์เศรษฐกิจที่ผันผวนอยู่ตลอดเวลานะครับแล้วก็ถือว่าเป็นอีกมุมมองหนึ่งที่น่าสนใจสำหรับการลงทุนผ่านกองทุนที่เป็นลักษณะขนาดใหญ่ๆแต่เขาเน้นการลงทุนไปที่บริษัทที่มีอนาคตและศักยภาพในการเติบโตซึ่งยังไม่ได้เข้าจดทะเบียนในตลาดหุ้นบริษัทพวกนี้มีจำนวนมากมายนะครับท่านผู้ชมครับทั่วโลกเพียงแต่ว่าเขาเองก็จะใช้เวลาในการพัฒนาทั้งผลิตภัณฑ์และบริการนั่นคือเหตุผลที่ว่าทำไมบริษัทนี้จึงเลือกการลงทุนแบบระยะยาวเพราะว่าบริษัทต่างๆเหล่านี้เขาต้องใช้เวลาในการพัฒนาทั้ง product และ service เขายกตัวอย่างได้ชัดเจนนะครับอย่างเช่น ChatGPT ที่ตอนนี้กำลังโด่งดังกันอย่างมากๆมันก็เป็นบริษัทที่เกิดขึ้นจากการพัฒนาซอฟต์แวร์ในการตอบโต้โดยอาศัยข้อมูลที่เรียกกันว่าเป็นข้อมูลอัจฉริยะหรือว่า artificial intelligence ก็เป็นบริษัทที่ต้องใช้เวลาในการไต่เต้าโตเป็นระยะยาวเพราะฉะนั้นการลงทุนระยะยาวจึงเป็นการลงทุนที่เมื่อ net ความเสี่ยงหรือสุทธิความเสี่ยงแล้วก็จะผลตอบแทนที่ดูคงเส้นคงวากว่าก็เป็นเรื่องราวที่ B-Times วันนี้นำมาเสนอให้กับท่านผู้ชมกันด้วยนะครับอย่าลืมนะครับติดตามเรื่องราวมุมมองไอเดียที่น่าสนใจเรื่องการลงทุนอย่างนี้กับ B-Times กันอย่างเสมอนะครับวันนี้ลาท่านผู้ชมไปก่อนสวัสดีครับ